What happens when Hollywood's most beloved action hero sits down for what should be a routine late-night interview, only to discover the host has a personal vendetta that's been brewing for years? Tonight we're diving into the explosive confrontation between Arnold Schwarzenegger and Jimmy Kimmel that shocked audiences and left one of them storming off set. But before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe how this unfolds. The stage was set for what appeared to be another typical Tuesday night on Jimmy Kimmel Live. Arnold Schwarzenegger, promoting his latest environmental initiative, walked onto the stage with his characteristic confident smile, waving to the enthusiastic audience. The crowd erupted in applause as the Austrian oak settled into the guest chair, adjusting his suit jacket with the practiced ease of someone who had done this hundreds of times before. "Arnold Schwarzenegger, everybody," Kimmel announced with what seemed like genuine enthusiasm, though those who knew him well might have detected something else lurking beneath the surface. "Thanks for being here, Arnold." "Always a pleasure, Jimmy," Arnold replied in his unmistakable accent, his voice booming across the studio with that familiar warmth that had endeared him to millions. "Though I have to say, your security team was quite thorough tonight. They searched my bag 3 times. The audience chuckled, but Kimmel's smile seemed forced. "Well, you know how it is these days. Can't be too careful, especially with former governors who know how to, shall we say, terminate things." Arnold raised an eyebrow at the odd phrasing but maintained his composure. "I suppose that's one way to put it. But I'm here to talk about something much more important than my old movies. We're facing a climate crisis that requires immediate action, and I've been working with various organizations to—" Right, Kimmel interrupted, leaning forward in his chair with an intensity that seemed disproportionate to the conversation. "But before we get to that, I want to talk about something else, something that's been bothering me for quite some time." The audience sensed a shift in the atmosphere. Arnold's expression grew more serious as he studied Kimmel's face. "What exactly are you referring to, Jimmy?" "Oh, I think you know exactly what I'm talking about," Kimmel replied, his voice taking on an edge that hadn't been there moments before. "You see, Arnold, I've been doing this show for years, and I've interviewed thousands of guests. Most of them are professional, respectful. They understand how television works. I believe I've always been professional in my appearances," Arnold said carefully, his tone remaining steady despite the obvious tension building between them. "Have you, though?" Kimmel shot back, his facade of friendliness completely dropping now. "Because I remember a certain interview we did a few years back where you completely disregarded my questions, went off script, and basically turned my show into your personal political platform." Arnold's jaw tightened slightly. "Jimmy, I think there might be some misunderstanding here. Every interview I've done on your show has been cleared through my publicist and yours. If there were any issues, they should have been addressed then." "Should have been, yes," Kimmel said, his voice rising slightly. "But they weren't, were they? And now here you are again, thinking you can just waltz in here and promote whatever cause you're pushing this week, without any regard for the fact that this is my show, my stage, my rules." The audience was now completely silent, sensing that what they were witnessing was no longer entertainment, but something much more personal and uncomfortable. Arnold shifted in his chair, his imposing frame somehow making Kimmel look even smaller by comparison. "I'm not sure what game you're playing here, Jimmy, but I came here in good faith to discuss important environmental issues," Arnold said, his voice maintaining its controlled tone despite the obvious provocation. "If you have some personal grievance with me, perhaps we should discuss it privately rather than airing it in front of your audience." "Oh, no," Kimmel said, shaking his head with mock sadness. "You see, that's exactly the problem. You think you can control every situation, dictate how things should be handled. Well, this is my house, Arnold, and I decide how things get handled here." "Your house?" Arnold repeated, a hint of steel creeping into his voice. "Jimmy, this is a television studio, not your personal kingdom. And these people, he gestured toward the audience, they came here to be entertained, not to watch you work through whatever psychological issues you might be having. The audience collectively gasped at the directness of Arnold's response. Kimmel's face flushed red, his hands gripping the edge of his desk so tightly his knuckles went white. Psychological issues. Kimmel's voice cracked slightly. That's rich, coming from someone whose entire career has been built on compensating for his insecurities with overblown machismo and political grandstanding. Arnold stood up slowly, his full height making him tower over the seated host. The movement was deliberate, controlled, but unmistakably threatening in its implications. I think we're done here, Jimmy. Sit down, Kimmel commanded, his voice shrill now. We're not done until I say we're done. This is my show, and you'll follow my lead, or you can explain to your publicist why you walked out on national television. My publicist? Arnold laughed, but there was no humor in it. Jimmy, I've faced down hostile foreign governments, negotiated with unions that wanted to destroy California's economy, and starred in movies where the budget was bigger than some countries' GDP. You think I'm worried about explaining myself to anyone over your little tantrum? The studio fell into an eerie silence as Arnold's words hung in the air like a challenge. Kimmel's face had gone from red to pale, but his eyes burned with a fury that seemed to consume any remaining professionalism he might have possessed. Little tantrum? Kimmel repeated, his voice barely above a whisper but somehow more menacing than if he had shouted. You want to see a tantrum, Arnold? Let me tell you what a real tantrum looks like. He stood up abruptly, knocking over his coffee mug in the process. The liquid spilled across his desk, soaking into his note cards, and creating a dark stain that seemed to mirror the atmosphere in the room. You think you're so superior, don't you? The great Arnold Schwarzenegger, action hero, politician, environmental crusader. But I know what you really are. Arnold remained standing, his arms crossed, watching Kimmel with the kind of calm intensity that had made him legendary in both Hollywood and Sacramento. Enlighten me, Jimmy. What am I really? You're a fraud, Kimmel spat, pointing an accusatory finger across the space between them. A muscle-bound pretender who stumbled into fame because you had the right look at the right time. And when that wasn't enough, you bought your way into politics with your wife's family connections. The audience gasped audibly. Several people in the front row looked genuinely uncomfortable, as if they were witnessing something they shouldn't be seeing. Arnold's expression didn't change, but those who knew him well would have recognized the subtle tightening around his eyes. Is that what you really think? Arnold asked, his voice dangerously quiet. That everything I've accomplished was handed to me? I don't think it. I know it, Kimmel shot back, now pacing behind his desk like a caged animal. You want to talk about your movie career? You can barely speak English without that ridiculous accent, and yet somehow you became one of the highest paid actors in Hollywood. You want to talk about your political career? You married into the Kennedy family and rode their coattails straight to the governor's mansion. Arnold took a step closer to the desk, his presence filling the space between them. Jimmy, you're crossing lines that you don't want to cross. I suggest you take a moment to think about what you're saying. Oh, I've thought about it plenty, Kimmel continued, his voice growing more manic by the second. Do you know how many genuinely talented people I've met over the years who never got the opportunities that were just handed to you? Actors who could actually act, politicians who actually understood policy, activists who actually cared about causes instead of just using them for publicity. You think I don't care about the environment? Arnold's voice rose for the first time, a hint of genuine anger breaking through his controlled demeanor. You think the work I've done with climate change organizations, the legislation I pushed through as governor, the millions of dollars I've donated to environmental causes, you think that's all just publicity? I think you're very good at making gestures that make you look good while avoiding anything that might actually cost you something. Kimmel replied, his smile returning but twisted into something ugly. It's easy to be an environmentalist when you own multiple mansions and travel in private jets. It's easy to talk about helping people when you've never actually struggled for anything in your life. The accusation hung in the air like a poisonous cloud. Arnold's hands clenched into fists at his sides, and for a moment, the former bodybuilder's raw physical power seemed to radiate through the studio. The audience held its collective breath. Never struggled? Arnold's voice was barely controlled now. Jimmy, I came to this country with nothing but a gym bag and a dream. I slept on friends' couches, I worked construction jobs during the day and trained at night. I was mocked for my accent, dismissed because of my background, told I would never amount to anything because I was different. Oh, spare me the immigrant success story, Kimmel interrupted with a dismissive wave. You had advantages that most people could never dream of. Your size, your connections, your timing. And instead of acknowledging that, you act like you pulled yourself up by your bootstraps through sheer determination. What I had was the willingness to work harder than anyone else in the room, Arnold shot back, his accent becoming more pronounced as his emotion intensified. What I had was the refusal to accept that other people's limitations had to become my limitations. And what I had was enough self-respect not to tear down other people's accomplishments because I was jealous of their success. The word jealous hit Kimmel like a physical blow. His face contorted with rage, and he leaned forward across his desk, bringing himself as close to Arnold as the furniture would allow. Jealous, he hissed. You think I'm jealous of you? I have everything I ever wanted. I have a successful show, a beautiful family, the respect of my peers. What could I possibly be jealous of? The fact that when people think of success, they think of stories like mine, Arnold replied, his voice steady again, but with an underlying steel that cut through the studio like a blade. The fact that I took risks while you played it safe. The fact that I built something meaningful while you spend your nights making jokes about other people's achievements. Kimmel's laugh was harsh and bitter. Meaningful? You call making mindless action movies meaningful? You call buying your way into political office meaningful? I call using whatever platform I have to make a positive difference meaningful, Arnold responded. I call inspiring people to believe they can overcome their circumstances meaningful. I call working to solve real problems instead of just complaining about them meaningful. Real problems? Kimmel's voice cracked with hysteria. You want to talk about real problems? The real problem is people like you who think they deserve to be taken seriously just because they're famous. The real problem is a society that elevates celebrity over substance, muscle over brains, wealth over wisdom. Arnold shook his head slowly, a look of genuine disappointment crossing his features. The real problem, Jimmy, is people like you, who are so consumed with their own bitterness that they can't see past their own resentment long enough to accomplish anything worthwhile. The words hit their target with surgical precision. Kimmel's face went through a series of expressions, from rage to hurt, to something that looked almost like recognition, before settling back into fury. But this time, the fury seemed more desperate, more unhinged. Bitterness? Kimmel's voice rose to a near shriek. You want to talk about bitterness? I'll show you bitter. Do you know what it's like to work your way up through comedy clubs? To grind for years just to get a shot at television, only to watch people like you get handed opportunities because of your looks or your connections? Nobody handed me anything, Arnold replied firmly. And the fact that you think they did says more about your character than mine. Character? Kimmel laughed maniacally, throwing his hands up in the air. That's perfect. Absolutely perfect. The man who cheated on his wife is going to lecture me about character. The politician who made promises he couldn't keep is going to talk to me about integrity. The audience was now visibly uncomfortable, with several people getting up to leave. The cameras continued rolling, but the crew looked uncertain, glancing, Between their director and the unfolding disaster on stage, Arnold's expression darkened considerably. "Jimmy, you just crossed a line that you can't uncross. My personal life, my family, that's not part of this conversation." "Oh, but it is," Kimmel pressed, sensing he had found Arnold's weakness. "Because you want to stand there and act like you're better than me, like you're some kind of moral authority. But the truth is, you're just another hypocrite who preaches one thing and does another. And you're a pathetic little man who builds his career on tearing down people who are actually doing something with their lives." Arnold shot back, his control finally beginning to slip. "You sit behind that desk every night and make jokes about people who are out there taking risks, making difficult decisions, trying to make a difference. When was the last time you put yourself on the line for anything that mattered?" Kimmel's eyes narrowed to slits. "I put myself on the line every night. I entertain millions of people. I give them a reason to laugh, to forget about their problems for a few minutes. What do you give them? False hope? Empty promises? Movies where you solve problems by shooting them? I give them proof that anything is possible if you're willing to work for it," Arnold replied, his voice rising to match Kimmel's volume. "I show them that you don't have to accept the limitations that other people try to put on you. You show them how to be small, how to be cynical, how to tear down instead of build up." "At least I'm honest about what I am," Kimmel screamed, his composure completely shattered now. "I don't pretend to be some kind of savior. I don't act like I have all the answers. I don't parade around like I'm God's gift to humanity. And I don't spend my time attacking people who are trying to do good in the world just because I'm too cowardly to try myself," Arnold roared back, his accent thick with emotion. "You want to know what the real difference is between us, Jimmy? When I see a problem, I try to solve it. When you see a problem, you make jokes about it and hope somebody else fixes it." The studio erupted in chaos. Some audience members were cheering, others were booing, and many were simply staring in shocked silence. The band members looked like they wanted to disappear into their instruments. Security guards had appeared at the edges of the stage, unsure whether to intervene. Kimmel's voice cut through the noise like a rusty knife. "Get out! Get out of my studio! Get out of my show! You're done here!" Arnold straightened to his full height, his presence commanding even in the midst of the mayhem. "I was done here the moment you decided to ambush me instead of conducting a professional interview. But let me leave you with something to think about, Jimmy." He moved closer to the desk, his voice dropping to a level that somehow carried more authority than all the shouting that had preceded it. "You have a platform that reaches millions of people every night. You could use it to inspire them, to educate them, to help them become better versions of themselves. Instead, you use it to feed your own ego and settle your personal scores. That's not just unprofessional. It's a waste of an opportunity that most people would kill for." "Don't you dare lecture me about opportunity," Kimmel snarled. "You wouldn't. No real opportunity if it hit you in your artificially enhanced face." Arnold smiled for the first time since the interview began, but it wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the smile of someone who had just been handed exactly what they needed to end the conversation definitively. "Artificially enhanced?" Arnold repeated, his voice eerily calm. "Jimmy, the only thing artificial in this room is your outrage. You planned this whole thing, didn't you? You brought me here not to promote environmental causes, but to try to humiliate me on television. The question is why? What did I ever do to you that warranted this kind of personal attack?" Kimmel's silence was answer enough. The truth hung in the air between them, obvious to everyone in the studio. This hadn't been a spontaneous outburst. It had been a calculated attempt to create a viral moment at Arnold's expense. Arnold nodded slowly, as if confirming something to himself. "I see? Well, Jimmy, I hope you got what you came for. I hope the ratings boost is worth sacrificing whatever integrity you had left." He turned toward the audience, his demeanor shifting completely. When he spoke, it was with the warmth and respect that had been absent from his exchanges with Kimmel. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize that you had to witness this. You came here to be entertained, and instead you got dragged into someone else's personal drama. That's not fair to you, and it's not what you deserve. The audience responded with scattered applause, clearly moved by his acknowledgement of their uncomfortable position. Arnold gathered his jacket from the back of the guest chair and walked toward the exit with the measured pace of someone who refused to be rushed or intimidated. As he reached the edge of the stage, he turned back one final time. "Jimmy, I genuinely hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, but I suspect you won't find it by trying to diminish other people." And with that, Arnold Schwarzenegger walked off the Jimmy Kimmel live stage, leaving behind a host whose credibility lay in ruins, and an audience that had witnessed one of the most explosive confrontations in late-night television history. The cameras kept rolling for several more seconds, capturing Kimmel standing alone behind his desk, the coffee stains spreading across his papers like a dark omen of what his reputation would look like when the clips of this interview inevitably went viral. What did you think of this incredible confrontation? Have you ever seen a late-night interview go so completely off the rails? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more unbelievable stories from Hollywood and beyond.